Hello and welcome to another episode of the Health Chat. Today we're discussing hair loss and how we can help to regenerate some of those hair follicles, especially the lazy ones. So I'm not really interested in the ones that are completely inactive because really there's nothing you can do if you're completely bald and you don't have any active hair follicles. We're talking about the ones that are a little bit sluggish and need a little bit of a spark. But, you know, like something came up on my feed with Jeff Bezos and his bald head. If the richest man in the world can't find a cure for baldness, then there probably is no cure. And so I have Rick with me here today, and that's what we're focusing is hair loss.
And, it may seem like a pretty simple topic. When we were looking at it, we thought, oh, this isn't maybe as complicated as some of the others, but it's certainly one that emotionally affects people, I think, very significantly as, skin conditions, as significantly as lack of sleep and mental health. Hair loss can be a very, very challenging time for people, especially if it's unexpected. You weren't ready for it, and all of a sudden, through whatever reason, you are faced with thinning hair and having a shower and losing your hair and all the things that come along with it in society and the pressures to have luscious locks, etc. So what looked on the surface as a simple topic turned out to be one I think that's pretty important.
So the first thing I thought we'd do is explore why we lose our hair. There are three main factors that commonly contribute towards this phenomenon. The first one is genetics. So male pattern baldness or female pattern hair loss. It's called androgenetic alopecia. And it's the most common cause of hair loss, which is largely determined by genetics. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do. Like, it's inevitable. You can delay it. You can sort of try to keep the hair in the follicle a bit longer than usual. But if you get it early enough, you'd be surprised at how effective some of the tactics are. And we're going to talk about those. We'll explore those. But in men, it usually presents as like a receding hairline and a balding at the crown. Whereas for women, it's overall thinning of hair. And that can be quite shocking for women to all of a sudden realize that, what once they had this beautiful, luscious hair is now quite thin and sparse. It's thought to be influenced by a particular hormone called DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, which can shrink hair follicles and shorten the hair cycle. So that's the genetic part. We also have other hormonal imbalances, which we'll talk about, and they can be like thyroid hormone related and even insulin related. But we'll talk about that as well. And that seems to affect women who have got PCOS or any other hormonal disturbances, because when a woman is pregnant, typically the hair is quite luscious because the estrogen holds on tight to that hair follicle. But once you give birth, of course, then the estrogen is no longer required and shedding of the hair takes place. So there are a couple of reasons, and there is also one more reason.
So yes, Vicky, one big category is medical conditions and treatments of a medical condition that can lead to hair loss or thinning of hair. So of course there are medical conditions that can cause hair loss, for example, autoimmune diseases like alopecia. The immune system attacks the hair follicles, and then you get those patchy hair loss bits. Other conditions, you might have a scalp infection. You might also have a nutritional deficiency. For example, you might be lacking in iron, and also, chronic illnesses may contribute towards hair loss that have been long term when the body's under pressure. I've got to throw in here as well that was something that wasn't in our notes, but when I talk about it now, I think we have to throw in stress into this area, because it really will contribute towards so many, or the worsening of so many conditions, and especially hair loss. Of course, if you've got having chemotherapy, radiotherapy, perhaps you're having antidepressants or blood thinners, these can cause temporary or permanent hair loss as a side effect. As I said in the beginning, it can be a challenging time emotionally, but also, as Vicky said, if you do some things we're going to suggest in the podcast, you can delay it or work alongside this and make the thinning of the hair or the hair loss less. We also have a little bit of technology that we're going to throw into you later that can help, and it's pretty amazing what's coming in future years. We were talking off the podcast camera yesterday about what's headed our way over the next 5 years, which is really really exciting in terms of the whole natural medicine sphere. Yeah.
So true. So let's talk about the DHT, or those testosterone derivatives and androgens. And unfortunately, when this sort of takes place, the most common medication that is prescribed is something called finasteride, and they're DHT blockers. But they're kind of designed for men with enlarged prostate, but they can be administered to women as well. And what that does is that just helps to block that conversion from testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, and therefore ensuring that the follicle stays active and you don't shed the hair. But, it's not always the first line of call for a lot of people, especially some women get a little bit concerned by taking a medication that's really designed for an enlarged prostate. But believe it or not, we have so much in our space that we can provide and we can suggest as alternatives that scientifically have been proven to work just as effectively. However, it does take longer. So the earlier you get on it, the better the outcome is, right? You're not going to wait for like 3 years before you do something. Like finasteride will probably kick in relatively fast, whereas you'll need something like saw palmetto, which has been researched quite significantly. It does take a little bit longer. So we always suggest, 4 to 6 weeks. But saw palmetto is one of those phytomedicines that has been found to be very effective. And most of the research suggests that anywhere from 300 to 500 milligrams daily in divided doses particularly. So most people would just take one dose of 150, 200 milligrams a day. It's not quite enough. You're looking at having between 160 to 250 milligrams twice a day. That's where it's most effective. And so when patients come and see me, I always say, make sure you take it in the morning and take it at night and take it with a meal, because that's the best way to take it, obviously. And there's also pygeum extract at 200 milligrams a day has been proven to work very well. And that does inhibit the conversion of testosterone to DHT. And of course, then there's green tea and pumpkin seed oil. They also inhibit 5-alpha reductase, which is used in that conversion. But for me, pumpkin seed oil is awesome because you can put it all over your salads. As long as you don't cook with it, it's fine. Or just grab a handful of pumpkin seeds and consume that, and you're getting a double benefit in the other wonderful nutrients that come in that seed, like the protein and other minerals. So for me, whenever someone comes in, I tend to go with the saw palmetto, the pygeum, and I look at always modifying their diet by suggesting reducing the caffeine, go for the green tea, and also take some pumpkin seeds. The other one that I found really interesting was how insulin and insulin growth factor 1 typically affect hair loss. And you're probably thinking, but how is that possible? Well, these hormones are involved in regulating blood sugar levels and therefore cell growth, right? High levels of insulin and IGF-1 are often associated with conditions like insulin resistance and diabetes. And these, of course, then contribute to inflammation and oxidative stress. And of course, that will then negatively impact our hair follicles and lead to hair loss. And I always suggest that people go to a calorie restriction, particularly fasting, like, every 3 days. Now, I have to be very careful when I talk about fasting because some people can take it to the extreme. Rick and I are both huge in this area. We both do fast, and sometimes I'll mix it up by doing a 400 calorie a day to restricting my intake of food for 17 hours. But that's not all day, every day, right? There are days where I eat, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but then there are days where I, cut out breakfast altogether, or I go on a 5-2 type of diet. And that's just to keep my body in guessing mode, like it never knows what to expect. Because I think if the body gets used to something, that's also not very good. So I like to sort of spice things up a bit, so to speak. But if you do tend to go for extensive periods of time with calorie restriction, you will also then negatively impact hair growth. And I've seen this in a lot of fad diets that women follow. And I'm not going to name the names, but there are heaps online. And they always say, you only need 800 calories a day. And women will consume only 800 calories a day for like 3 months. And the first thing to go is their hair, because the body's going, well, I have to preserve as much nutrients as I can for my vital organs. The hair isn't that necessary at the moment. Let's just get rid of that. But then to get your hair back, so once you've completed that regime and you want to reignite your hair follicles, it's very difficult.
Anything extreme, Vicky, we talked in other podcasts as well. needs to be kept to short, sharp bursts or done with
Agree.
supervision with a healthcare practitioner, because sometimes less is more,
Yeah.
and we don't always go for that. I've seen that, yeah, where people follow regimes often for years and years,
Yeah.
and to the detriment, as you're saying, to the hair. It is one of the things that goes first. One of the things that goes first when you're not getting the amount of nutrients that you really need to nourish the body, for, as you were saying, everyday function, let alone stuff that isn't that important, and the body certainly thinks, well, we don't really need that. We'll just take the nutrients elsewhere.
And you'll probably see that there are quite a lot of women that can be quite slender, but the hair just doesn't seem to grow past a certain point.
Mm,
And that also indicates that there's nutritional deficiencies there.
mm.
And I always recommend people consume a higher amount of fiber, plant-based diet, legumes, omega-3 fatty acids, and of course, getting the right amount of sleep and physical activity, as well as some shock sort of intermittent fasting. Not all the time, just a little bit here and there. That does help any insulin resistance or diabetic type conditions.
And just touching on that point again briefly, what often when people start taking vitamins, or they do a healthy eating plan, they'll come back and they'll report to you that their hair and nails are growing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
one of the first things that kind of happens. And then and I always say to everybody, don't complain about that. That's pretty good, because that sort of shunted growth or stunted growth that you sort of get with your nails is another indication that maybe you're nutrient deficient. And when you fuel the body with the right stuff, the hair and nails starts coming along, and you
yeah.
you get that glow, which everybody's looking for. I touched on previously about stress and the negative impact that it can have, and it brings us back to nasty old cortisol. And it's produced by the adrenal glands, as you know, in response to stress. Now, when we get chronic stress or stress that lasts a long time, the cortisol levels get elevated, and therefore what happens is disruption to the hair growth cycle, and therefore you'll get a contribution towards hair loss. Other than that, the high cortisol levels trigger inflammation, and inflammation can inhibit production of other hormones that are necessary for hair growth. So bit of a double whammy. We don't want it. Makes us feel bad stress, makes us look bad stress. So we're trying to calm it down. Now, I know everyone who's listening thinking, yeah, it's all very well to say just reduce stress. And I sometimes feel slightly hypocritical talking about stress, because my reactions to it are not always the best. But I do my best, and I do have an arsenal of vitamins, minerals, and lifestyle things that I do in order to try to keep it down. But we do have some favorites, and we often talk about the adaptogens, and we've talked about them all the time. I don't talk about them again, but adaptogenic um, botanicals in particular, like ashwagandha or withania, rhodiola, and holy basil. They're three that may give you some relief and help with hair growth. So we're not actually dealing with the hair loss, we're dealing with the stress, which in turn will help us with the hair growth and the inflammation, etc. Remembering you've also got up your sleeve our magnesium and magnesium baths. You've got apps that can help you with mindfulness. You've got exercise. You've got a good old laugh with somebody, and you've got a good TV show and some lovely music. Anything to get you out of that space. If, of course, you're in a real space where stress has overtaken, it's not as easy as just to take the ashwagandha, because maybe you don't want to. Maybe you can't do that because it's just too much. That's when a healthcare practitioner can really guide you through and get you on that first step and the second step. And if you're in a really deep stress state, I just want to reach out and say you can get out of it from a baby step, and that might just be going to see someone and talking about your mental health to start off with.
So I'm going to just say something really interesting, that I didn't realize how much stress had an effect on my insulin,
Mm,
because we all talk about it, but you don't quite understand it until you see it for yourself. So I'm sure if you're watching the video, you can see, but I've got a constant glucose monitor attached to me. I purchased one and I put it on. It was an interesting sort of process. And I've had it now for just 10 days. And I've been tracking my blood glucose, right? And everyone's like, oh, you can't eat carbs, you can't have pasta, you can't have this. Actually, it turns out I'm not that unlucky. It seems that I can eat most things and it does not spike my insulin at all, unless, of course, I'm having a slice of cake, right? Which is, of course, full of sugar. But I've actually learned over many years how to combine my food. So if I am having a carb-loaded meal, I tend to have my protein portion first, and that does help to reduce that spike in sugar in my body. But what I did find was whenever I was stressed, so whenever I get in the car to pick up my kid because I'm late, or when I'm paying a bill, or anything that is highly stressful, I can see within minutes my blood sugar and my glucose just shoot right up.
Mm.
And you don't realize the impact that it has until you see it for yourself. So I've got this app and it syncs to the app, this little chip. And you think that stress doesn't have an effect, but by gosh, it does. It really does. And it's been one of the biggest eye openers wearing this device.
I think with stress is we just accept it, don't we? We accept that it's always there. We accept it's in the background. If we've had it all of our lives, you sort of oscillate between, stressed and not so stressed, but not calm. I'm not talking about being happy. I think happy is a different,
Mm.
it should be alternated with sadness. You shouldn't be happy all the time, but we do want you being content. But I love those devices. And we were talking yesterday when we were looking at our notes for the podcast today about what's coming. I mean, I think functional medicine is very interesting where you do all your testing and you can get all your results and it takes a lot of the guesswork away. And it's amazing. But I saw a report on AI, and I know there's some negative aspects to it, but there's also some, very positive ones in the realm of health and how we can sort of monitor and maybe something reminding you daily of what you need to do, so you can tell. But I love that you can see that happening when you pay the bill, because when you read about stress and you read about cortisol, it all becomes like this mystery thing, doesn't it?
It
It's like,
does.
oh, well, cortisol, what does it really mean? But then when you see it actually taking effect on the body, I think you're more likely probably to be more mindful of, this is making me stressful. How can I calm it down? And speaking of the future, not that this is really future, but I started looking into infrared technology a little while ago when I was invited actually to present it for a media thing. And I didn't end up doing it because guess what? I was too stressed. Funny that. But I didn't end up doing it because at that time of my life, it was a little bit busy. But I did do all the research into it, and it made me really interested in that whole area. And the research, whilst it's sort of somewhat in its infancy, um, we do know a little bit about it. We do know that light frequency can help improve blood circulation. It can enhance cellular metabolism, and we talked about that in many of our past podcasts for the importance of aging, to help with aging well, and it can reduce inflammation. So they're things we want. We don't even want those things for hair loss. We want those things for overall health. And guess what? Those things can help you reduce stress, which is ultimately going to then have a cascading effect to reduce inflammation and improve cellular metabolism even more. So what the infrared technology has been shown to do is ignite the mitochondria. I love that word. How's your mitochondria? It's ignited. Thanks. My mitochondria are really having an ignition. Go on. I wish my brain would ignite more often, but there you go. Well, worry about that later. But what it does is the mitochondria increase ATP production, and they stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, promote cell survival, and therefore enhance the whole function of the mitochondria. So we sort of want that. So we're going to keep the hair follicle healthy and active, and therefore we're going to have better, less hair loss, less thinning, less breaking, less all those nasty things that you want. And then because the hair follicle's in better health, you've then got a better way of getting the nutrients there. You know what I mean? It's like it's ready to receive, shall we say, the nutrients. So if you follow Vicky's suggestions, which I think were really spot on, and that's why I love doing the podcast with you, because our thoughts on the basic philosophies of eating are similar, even though we eat different things, about the fasting, about the not overdoing it, about including some carbs so you can get some serotonin and feel a bit happy. So if you can keep your food wholesome, whatever, type of food you're having. And if you can then do the intermittent fasting or use the nutrients that we talked about when we talked about our podcast on autophagy and cellular senescence, you're going to go a long way to improving hair health as well as overall health. But people will often ask us, well, what can I take? You know, because that's really what we want. It's all right for us to sit here raving on about what causes it. We're like the supermarket, Vicky. We save the supplements to the end, really. Then we tell everyone so they have to listen to it all. Little do we know they've got a fast forward button and they're probably going to the end. But anyway, I talked about iron before. Now we want it because it will help carry oxygen to the hair follicles. It'll reduce hair shedding. So very important that we keep that iron up. Zinc is another one. We talk about zinc a lot, and these same nutrients, these same minerals and vitamins come up over and over again. And zinc is another one. Wonderful for the immune system, but also helps hair growth and prevents hair loss. And guess what I'm going to say? Sorry, everyone. I'm going to talk about vitamin D again and do it all the time. But that helps to regulate hair growth cycles, as well as help with mood, as well as help with the immune system, as well as help to reduce stress levels. So it's a good one to have. Also, omega-3 fatty acids. Now, these are so important for hair, skin, nails. They are the beauty, the beauty thing that you want. If you want plumpness in your skin, and if you want to reduce inflammation and improve blood circulation. So they're quite simple and easily available. What I will say as well is, don't overlook the brightly colored powders. I say these all the time, but things like acai, berry powder, chlorella, spirulina, anything that's bright, anything that stains the fingers, berry powder, beetroot powder, whatever you want to do, go off and do it. Mango powder. Those brightly colored powders work really well alongside something like this because they're nutrient dense. And if you've had a day where you haven't followed a good diet or you're fasting to help with hair growth or to help with weight loss, you can then, when you break your fast with nutrient density, and then we might want to throw in some plant-based protein and break it with a smoothie, which is what I do. And don't judge me because I'm pretty old now, but without it, I'd be worse. And it's a great way to break a fast, break the intermittent fasting with nutrient density, and you're going to get not only better, healthy, shiny, glowing hair, less hair loss, but overall a better overall health by doing that.
The infrared technology to me is so big. Like, it's been huge for a long time, but it's getting even bigger, and it's moved from it used to be a hair wand that you keep on your head for like 5 or 15 minutes because it the infrared activity does stimulate the mitochondria, that now they do it on the face. So women purchase, or I shouldn't say women, anyone who wants to look younger, they purchase those infrared face masks because that's the action that it has. And the infrared saunas that you were talking about do the same thing, but on a complete body level. So there's a lot to be said about infrared technology. So I really believe that if there's someone out there that's serious about reigniting their hair follicles, it is definitely something to look at. And
I was talking to someone from who works in a naturopath who works in a hair loss clinic, and she was telling me that also, how there's that, I mean, I don't like to use that term, the vampire lift, but I do like it. But they do it on the scalp. So they do the micro needling on the scalp to stimulate hair growth. So that might be something to look into as well. And she was saying the results are very good. So that's something just to keep in mind as well. And it sounds more painful than it is. And they can do it to different depths as well. So you don't have to go in there and, end up I'm going to again show my age, end up like Carrie, the original movie. It doesn't have to be incredibly painful, but they can also apply a pain numbing cream if you're a bit nervous. But that micro needling, it's great for skin, but also may have benefits for hair loss.
Actually, speaking of micro needling, the reason why it is particularly effective is not only because it causes trauma to the area, which then reignites the activity of fibroblasts, but what it does is when you puncture the skin and then you apply something topical, you're going to get far better absorption of those products that you apply. And we've got hydrosol rosemary, I think, at Auburn, which you can spray it after you've microneedled. You apply that hydrosol, and and caffeine type of shampoos, and it just reignites everything. It's very powerful.
And speaking of rosemary, we have a lovely hair tonic from Weleda that's rosemary based. So rosemary's one. I'm glad we got to it at the end, and it wasn't in our notes actually, so we'd forgotten about it. Ironically, rosemary also does memory, so maybe we need that. But but it is one that I was looking at the other day when we're doing our research for it, and it's got some good stuff. So maybe you can get a little hair tonic going, and some good shampoos. And we've talked about it before. Ditch the chemicals,
Mm.
get something that's going to be natural and actually help the body, and see how you go that way.
I think there is something to be said about one more ingredient that I have found
Mm.
to be hugely beneficial. So this is a personal story. You can click off if you want and you don't want to hear it, but this is really interesting. So my hair used to be really luscious, and then I had children, and it was good, but it never seemed to grow past a certain point, or it broke at a certain point, and I just couldn't get it to grow, and it wasn't full. It was kind of like lazy hair follicles, I suppose is the right word. And it's not like I used any chemicals or anything, really high quality shampoos. Um, I was doing all the right things. I probably wasn't taking a lot of collagen products, but I'm going to tell you what I did take, and it just inadvertently helped my hair. And I remember my husband saying, "Oh, I've noticed your hair is really getting long very fast." And I was like, "You're right. My hair is growing at a rapid rate." And then I'm like, "It actually feels really full." And I don't know what I've done. It's also getting full of gray hairs, but my hair is getting fuller. And the only thing that I had done differently was I was taking NMN and nicotinamide riboside.
Mhm.
We've spoken about these two hero products many times before. But there was a part of me that thought, I wonder if this is doing anything to my hair. So what I did was I went onto Google Scholar, and I found a very recent piece of research. It was done this year, 2024. It was conducted by Chun Tao et al., and it showed that NMN can reverse the state of hair follicle atrophy, hair thinning, and hair sparsity. And
Wow.
it just blew my mind
Yes.
how
Yes.
effective it is. And I thought, let's read this piece of research. So I'll tell you really briefly how it's done. If you're interested in it, you can just go to Google Scholar, type in NMN hair loss mice, and you'll probably find it. But I'll tell you how they conducted. They had 4 groups. All the mice had laser hair removal to a patch on their body. And it was the same patch on each group of mice. They were divided into 4 groups. One group had DHT injected 4 weeks prior. There was a control group that didn't have anything done to them. There was a group that had an NMN administered, and another group had minoxidil administered. So minoxidil is that topical that's used for hair loss, and you apply it twice a day. And we know minoxidil works very well. And what they found over a period of 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 days was the group that was administered the DHT, the hair growth came back very, very slow and sparse. The control group did have some hair growth, but very, very slow. The groups that had NMN and minoxidil, their hair growth, follicle size, hair strength was comparable to one another, which states that there is some proof, and there's more research to be done in this area, but there is some proof that NMN can be just as effective as something like minoxidil. And that to me is such a breakthrough, because first of all, you think about, well, why would it work? It's pretty obvious, because it's feeding that ATP, it's feeding that energy production. And that's what you were speaking about before with the mitochondria being reactivated. And that's what we need. They need to be fed something so they can be reactivated. And so for me personally, I have noticed quite a difference. I usually got my hair cut once a year, and now I'm getting my hair cut 3 times a year. It grows too fast now. I don't even, it's annoying. So there's something to consider in a men.
Good for your hairdresser, though.
Oh, great for business.
I should be selling NMN. They're all missing a trick. Any
I
hairdressers
think
listening, give us a call. We'll set you up.
microneedle shampoo with NMN. Whack.
Oh
You
dear.
never know.
So that brings us to the end of our chat about hair. I hope you enjoyed it as much as Hair the musical. I think it was just as entertaining. And we are going to talk about muscle wastage. And notice my biceps are out of the shot when I said that. And we're going to talk about, how to tone, how to get them up. Because on a serious note, muscle wastage as people get older or they've got certain illnesses can be quite debilitating. So we're going to take a look at that, have a look at what we've got in our arsenal, how we can get your muscles firing and how we can get you toned, taut and terrific, really.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.